So as the supply increases, that means that they're willing to offer more at any particular price. What about a movement along the supply curve? A movement along the supply curve is very similar to a movement along the demand curve. Somebody's music is going. Thanks. All right, so a movement along, and that's why I put a demand curve there. Boop, boop, boop. A movement along the supply curve is going to look just like something like this, where we go from maybe $2 to $4. And we're literally just going from 8,000, because that was how many the suppliers would have provided before, to, or well, let's say 2,000 just to keep it all the same. And now at 4, how many are they willing to provide? They're willing to provide 5,000. Little tablet can't keep up. So let's do an example. We'll put them both together. We're going to do an example about the tennis market. And so we are told that the price for renting tennis courts is going to decrease. And as a result of this, the demand for tennis balls is going to increase or shift outwards. So let's go ahead and do this graphically. So the first one we're going to have as tennis court rentals. Again, we've got our price, we've got our quantity. Have this be a downward sloping demand curve. And what are we told in the prompt? We're told the price of renting tennis courts has decreased. So is there any demand shift going on here? No, there's a movement along the demand curve. So we go from $10, I'm just going to stick with the amounts from the book here. We go from $10 down to $7. And as a result, there's going to be more tennis courts that are demanded and rented. So it starts out with 400 per day and ends up with 1,100 per day, right? Now, because of this price decrease, and what? What's the thing in the middle that we need to know? We need to know that tennis courts This really does not like this new app. Tennis courts and tennis balls are what? Complements, right? You use them together. Very rarely will you use a tennis ball to maybe like massage your back or your foot or something like that, right? But for the most part, or maybe like you play catch with your dog with a tennis ball, right? But for the most part, use a tennis ball on a tennis court, right? So they are complements. So as the price of tennis court rentals decreases, there is a corresponding shift outwards in the demand for tennis ball sales. So let's go ahead and model that. So we've got a downward sloping demand curve here. We've got an upward sloping supply curve right here. And then a new demand curve is going to be represented by this red line and as D prime. And so we find that at the old price, before it was $1, and there were 40 million balls demanded a day. I didn't label this all the way. I need to label my axes, and then I should be specifying if it's by period down there as well. So at $1, we have 40 million, but the price of tennis court rentals decreased. As a result, the demand for tennis balls increased regardless of the price. And because of the supply curve, that upward sloping supply curve, right? What would happen if demand were to just stay at $1? If the price were to stay at $1 with demand shifting outwards? Well, we would only have 40 million provided, and there would be how many demanded? You know, something like 80 million or something, right? We would have a shortage. But instead of having a shortage, what's going to happen is we're going to move along that supply curve until we find the new equilibrium point where every quantity is supplied, every quantity that's demanded is supplied, and everything that is supplied is purchased. So at this new price of $1.40, we find that there are 58 million tennis balls demanded. So this is a movement along the supply curve caused by a shift in the demand caused by a complementary good price change. Okay, let's list and make sure that we all understand all of the different causes for shifts in demand. So we just saw one of them, right? The price of complementary goods. So tennis courts, tennis balls, hot dog buns, shrimp cocktail sauce. I'm sure there's, should be bicycle helmets and bicycles, but unfortunately not so much, right? The other one, well, there's many. There's 6 total, right? So the second one is the price of another type of related good called substitute goods. And we've all experienced this. We've gone to the store and all of a sudden, the pork is more expensive or the beef is more expensive, and we say, I'll get the chicken instead. Or I'll just do pasta without any protein or something like that, right? Or maybe, this type of milk's expensive, so you go for the generic milk. So anytime there is a price increase of a substitute good, that's going to cause the consumers to demand more of the original good. Yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. All right. Third one, income. But it's important for us to remember that when we're talking about income, there are two different types of goods. So we have normal goods and inferior goods. So let's first talk about inferior goods. Inferior goods are those where, as your income increases, so as you get paid more, the quantity demanded actually decreases. So this would be ramen noodles, it would be bus passes, right? If you live in the city, once you get out of a certain income bracket, you no longer need to buy bus passes because you have purchased a car, right? Just generic kind of most things are inferior goods. The other type of goods is the type of goods that we are most used to purchasing, right? These are normal goods. So clothes, video games, any kind of consumer electronics, any kind of just kind of normal food, right? And this is as your income increases, the quantity demanded that you have for them increases. So those are just called normal goods. So it's just important for us to keep in mind that income, it's not like a, rising tide raises all boats or whatever, right? Like as your income increases, you're not just going to purchase more of the same. You're actually going to shift the patterns of your consumption. And so there are certain goods you are going to consume less of, and those goods are called inferior goods. Questions on that? Cool. The biggest one, and the one that we see in play most of the time, is just tastes and preferences. So, Marvel action figures after, the release of Infinity War Endgame, right? A lot of times, there'll be a study that says that something is either healthier or, more dangerous for you or whatever, right? And that's going to influence the demand, right? So if there's a study that says that cashews are good for your heart health or whatever, right? Then demand is going to increase because people's tastes and preferences have changed. And these tastes and preferences, they're not built in, right? There's a billion-dollar industry, pumping advertising into Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all sorts of stuff, right? To try to shape our tastes and preferences. Two more causes for shifts in demand. One of the ones which kind of, it's fairly straightforward is number of buyers in the market. So, obviously globalization, right, has expanded the amount of international trade. And so these markets that we have are much larger than they were 30 or 40 years ago. So as, a country comes online and starts to, order things off Amazon or whatever the case may be, that's going to shift demand to the right. There's also going to be demand shifts to the left, say, because of just the loss of human life because of COVID, right? That would be a decrease in the number of buyers in the global market or in a lot of these different markets, right? So that would cause a shift leftward or a decrease in demand. And the last one, the most esoteric, most difficult to grasp, is our expectations. about future prices. So if we think, for whatever reason, that, milk is going to be crazy expensive or impossible to get or something, right? Then there might be like a run on powdered milk, and a bunch of people might be like stocking their basement up with powdered milk or something, right? I mean, we literally lived through this when everybody went and bought canned goods. Right, when everybody went and freaked out and bought toilet paper and bought a bunch of chickpeas and other canned goods and stuff like that, right? And it was because of the fact that they were worried that because of COVID and the interruption to just our everyday life and the supply chain and things like that, right? That some of these things would be more expensive or just unavailable, right? And so as a result, there was a dramatic increase in demand, and as a result, we ended up seeing a lot of those items not being there, right? They were in short supply. One of the things that we know in our heart of hearts, is that price changes never cause a shift in demand. So let's do an example of this. So we're going to do apartments near DC Metro. So we'll just say DC apartments. This is like an exercise in patience with how lagging this thing is today. I think I'm going to reformat this. All right, so we are told that, obviously, right, Washington, D.C. is are the government, it's the capital of the United States, where a lot of our government, federal agencies and stuff like that are, right? So if the government increases their wages, what will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity for DC apartments? So in your head, try to test yourself right now. If the wages increase, what will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity? So the first thing you ask yourself when you're asked about what would happen to the equilibrium price and quantity is really, what's that asking? That's asking what happens to supply, demand, or both, right? And so we have to figure out, what is this doing? Is this going to shift supply or demand, right? Well, anytime our income increases, that is going to shift our demand curve, right? That is one of our 6 factors of demand. We've got price of complementary goods, price of substitute goods. We've got your income. We've got preferences. We've got number of consumers, and we've got future expectations, right? So your income increases. So we know demand's going to shift. It's not going to have anything to do with supply. Supply has to do with producers and sellers and things like that, right? Income has to do with consumers. But is it going to shift outwards or inwards? In order to answer that question, we have to know something more about a DC apartment. Is it an inferior or a normal good? As you earn more money, are you more likely to live in an apartment, a convenient apartment near your work in downtown Washington, D.C., or are you less likely?
Probably less likely.
Why less likely?
If you're making more money, you can afford to live in whatever part of the city you want.
But let's say this is the best part of the city. So let's say this is like the financial district, like right next to, the Capitol building or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a Trader Joe's right downstairs and all your bougie, stuff that you need, right? So what would happen? Yeah.
Wouldn't it slowly decrease because most people go for houses once they start making money?
That's a good point. And there is like a lot of people that like live in Alexandria or Baltimore, right, that work in DC. So that's a very good point. So that might be but that is again kind of a second order. That's a substitute good. You know what I mean? Like that would be like I would have to be more specific in my prompt. We would have to be modeling the housing market, number one, and then I'd be specific in my prompt and be like, people are making more money and opting to decrease their demand for apartments. Apartments and houses are substitute goods. What would that do? But that's a very good point. But in this example, we're going to say that they're normal goods. People are going to want to decrease their commute. They're going to want to, be in a safer area than they might be, right? There's a lot of places in DC that are unfortunately not terribly safe. I did an internship there, so I know. And so as a result, there will be a shift outwards in the demand curve. Our new equilibrium price will be higher than the old one. I swear. And the quantity that is consumed in terms of DC apartments, right? The quantity that's available and the quantity that's consumed is going to increase. So the units per month that are rented will increase, and the price, the monthly rental rate, will also go up. So this plus normal good equals demand increase, which, without anything else happening, would result in a higher price and a higher quantity. Questions on that? We've got some really good feedback, though. So thinking, like, you're thinking in the right, you're using the right economic type of thinking. Words are not coming to me today. Some days are good, some days are bad. Okay, let's talk about shifts in supply. So just like there's a long list for demand, there's a long list for supply. Let's try to get it all on one thing here, though. I'll make it a little bit smaller. Supply shifters. Okay, so the first one, and the one that you'll probably see the most of, is our change in the input, or the price of an input, right? So it's sometimes seen as FOP, which stands for factors of production. Do y'all know how to read cursive? Not everybody? Okay, I'll go back to writing. I was like, maybe I could get ahead of the lag by just doing cursive, but all right, so factors of production, right? These are the inputs. So we are seeing this right now, right? In terms of just the general inflation that we're seeing. Why is that? Because gas is an input in everything, right? It takes oil and gas to ship things places. It takes oil to make the packaging for a lot of the things that we purchase, right? So when the price of that input, that kind of core input increases, there's going to be a shift leftward in supply. So like if the fiberglass in skateboards were to go up, there would be a shift inwards in supply. or if construction wages went up and this was the price of homes. So this was the housing market. And this shift was because the construction wages increased. So at any given price, there's going to be less provided by the construction company, the skateboard manufacturer, the food manufacturer, whatever the case may be. Could also be because of a change in technology. So, word processing technology and your ability to do term papers, right? We're able to push y'all to produce more term papers and stuff like that now because you have your computers and stuff, and it's much faster to do revisions and everything like that compared to before. You had to write it out by hand. Maybe you had to go to a typewriter or something like that, or you had to go to the library. There's any kind of increase in technology is going to increase the supply. Right? So, internet distribution of products, just the advent of e-commerce, right? So just e-commerce being a thing is going to cause there to be a shift outwards as e-commerce, as it becomes easier and easier to purchase things and sell things on the internet, the supply is going to shift outwards. Sometimes there might be a change in technology that makes it so that they can produce skateboards with less fiberglass, or a change in technology so that they can create, buildings. Like I think there was like a big news article and YouTube video 5 years ago or whatever, and it was like a robot building itself. There was like nobody. It was in China, and there was no humans there. It was just robots doing it, right? So that's an increase in technology that's going to allow us to produce more at any given price. One that we are unfortunately familiar with the vicissitudes of is weather. That's going to impact supply, right? If it's a really crappy year, we're not going to do too well. So this is especially true for ag commodities, and outdoor entertainment. Festivals, rodeos, all sorts of stuff, right? And then the last one, two more, sorry. Number of sellers in the market. So as more people enter the market, there's just going to be more stuff provided at any given price. Right? So as the number of sellers increases, the supply is going to increase. And then the last one, and this one's a little bit confusing because it's both in the supply and the demand, is expectations, right? Expectations of future price changes. Hope you know how to spell expectations, because it's not showing up there. So what do we mean by this? Well, in a similar way that if you think the price of something is going to increase, you're going to go out and purchase a bunch of it right now. If you are a producer of that good and it doesn't go bad and you think the price of it's going to increase, wouldn't you hold off and sell it later? So if you think the price is going to increase in the future as a seller, that's going to shift your supply inwards, right? You're going to hold on to that inventory. Whereas if you think the price is going to decline, that's going to have a shift outwards in supply because you're going to get as much of that product for the price right now as you can sold. All right, so we'll start off in class on Wednesday with some examples of supply shifts. I will reboot this thing so it will not be so laggy. It was a good exercise in Zen patience for all of us. Thank you, guys.